See some people trickling in to Chalombo Careers' first Instagram Live. We'll wait a few minutes to see who else will be joining, and feel free to comment with your questions. Then I'll hopefully get to them during this little session. If someone could just comment letting me know that you can hear me. Just want to make sure I have no sound issues. Hello. I see some familiar Instagram handles. Cool. All right, so for those, great, thank you. So for those just tuning in, we haven't started yet. I just kind of wanted to give a few, grace, a little bit of a grace period. That's what I'm trying to say, for others who may join, and then I'll go ahead and get started. And feel free to comment your questions if you haven't already submitted, and I'll hopefully be asking or be able to answer them at the end. If not, I'll post some answers sometime over the weekend. So I'll get started in a minute. Alrighty, great. So I think I really just want to dive right in. I really decided to do this because as I do my consultation calls and work with different people, one thing that I've really noticed in a lot of resumes I see and also just in conversations that I have with people is that skills are something that a lot of people, that reach out have a wide variety of skills. And beyond what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to kind of talk about 10 skills that are a mix of different aspects of public health that I think are important to have. But of course, there's many other things, especially if you're in a very specific area of public health. But one thing I've noticed a lot is that a lot of people have the skills, but they're not really communicating them either, especially when it comes to like their resumes and things of that nature. And so I kind of wanted to go and kind of lay out 10 skills. I'll give you a reason as to why I think it's a skill in the context of me or in general. And then that can also kind of help you, not even just in terms of kind of knowing how to be competitive, but also kind of knowing what, for those of you who are maybe recent in MPH or planning to go to do an MPH program, which I know are a few currently here, kind of help direct you towards, what courses and things are out there in order to learn these things. All right. So the first thing that I want to, say is I know that sometimes, some of these skills you can't gain until you get that practical experience. I think one of the biggest challenges in public health is getting, experience when they're already asking you to have a million years of experience. And I think everyone's very familiar with, a lot of the suggestions surrounding internships and volunteer opportunities, which I'm personally someone who despises unpaid internships. I think volunteering is separately because the purpose of volunteering is to be able to, give back in a selfless way. But I think, a lot of the experiences that are quote unquote considered, most important for gaining public health experience are unpaid internships, which, has its own equity issues, but I won't go into all of that. So the first skill that I'll talk about, and I kind of want to just gonna comment as I go so that people joining later maybe can see this. And I will circulate this list after. But the first one is not a skill per se, but it's just a thing. So the first skill or thing is to have a niche. And so what I mean by niche, and I think sometimes, people think, oh, so I have to be an expert in a specific public health topic. Like I must know everything about diabetes and only that. So I'll talk about subject matter expertise later, but a niche is really just, something like your core skill set. A lot of people, their LinkedIn header is their niche. For example, mine is global health, data analytics, M&E. That's my niche. In short, if I was to describe that in more detail, I'd go into the specific depths of that. But it's very important to have a niche. And so that's something that I highly suggest. And I think the best way to communicate a niche is in the top of your resume. So in the profile section of your resume, some people call it summary of qualifications. It should be maybe 3 sentences, maybe longer if you're submitting a federal resume, that really hone in on what your key skills are. So if a resume reviewer, a hiring manager is only looking at your resume for 2 minutes, they could read that and know what you're about. So again, the first one is a niche. The second thing that I'll talk about is I'm kind of just combining 2 things that are similar. So the second skill that I'll bring up is interpersonal skills and effective communication. So this is something that, and again, obviously, as I go through these skills, you notice how they'll apply to jobs, the industry as a whole, but I'm going to specifically talk to them about them in many different industries, but I'm going to specifically talk about them in the context of public health. So number 2, which I'm going to type now, which is interpersonal and communication, is really important. And I think one thing that's misleading is a lot of times when people talk about skills in public health, they're broken up into hard skills and soft skills, which I don't necessarily love that term, although it's a very commonly used one, because I think there's a connotation to a hard skill, like, oh, those are better, more, rigorous, versus soft skills, which are like easier to have. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I think even if you're, have that quote unquote hard skill of data, you can analyze data, complex data using software programs, which again, we'll talk about later. Communication is important, because as someone who sits in front of a computer for a lot of my job looking at data, at the same time, I also have to communicate that data, liaise with different people across South Africa, where I'm currently based. And I know a lot of people who are heavy data people, but their work involves a lot of interactions, and vice versa. There will be people who are working directly with the beneficiaries of the community health programs, the clients, the patients, those who are sick. So being able to communicate not just with your staff, if you're working with implementing partners, stakeholders, government, whatever it may be, but with other with community members. And I think that also ties in the importance of cultural sensitivity and being able to be an active listener as well as a contributor, and knowing when to do so. So I think those are skills that are important to have, and I think it's something that can be inherent, but it also can be learned in terms of best practices to do so. Okay, so that was number 2. All right, so the third skill that I'm going to talk about is just writing skills. So writing is really important in public health. There's so many things, deliverables, that you may have to do at some point, from schooling when you're a student all the way through any sort of position. So grants, I know there's so many grant writers in public health, or people who don't have a primarily grant writing position, but they end up having to contribute to writing a grant. So a lot of students, if you want to get funding for your summer research or your thesis, a lot of times you have to write a grant proposal, either a full grant or proposal. Obviously, for those of you who are at the PhD level, that is very important as well, to be able to have those skills. And I think writing is something that, as someone who's, constantly working on writing people's resumes and documents and things like that, writing skills was never my forte, to be honest, when I was growing up. And my younger sister, who's a writer, she was the one who was always editing my things for me, and I was able to learn from her about really, how to craft essays. And so I do recommend, there are a lot of resources out there too, especially for those of you in school, to go to your writing center and really kind of learn how you can improve your writing skills, because I think that is a challenge that I do see in a lot